Hey everybody. Um, Hope you all are doing well, staying healthy in these interesting uh, times here. Um, Before I get into things, something that I learned. So um, all the people that I interviewed are actually not people that I knew personally. They're friends of friends. Um, One of them was actually a friend of my brother's, but something that I learned, something that we talked about when we met that weekend back in February, was talking about how important it is to be present in the lives of those who maybe don't know Jesus. And something that I've learned through this, like I said, being that all my students that I interviewed were people I didn't know personally, was that I've got some work to do in that area. I come from a good home, two parents still married. I spent most of my schooling at a private Christian school. I'm a theology major. I just, the crowds, I've always just run in the Christian crowd. Um, so that's something that has come to my attention through the course of this project, and how I might want to improve on that in the future. Um, so so yeah, let's go ahead and get into it. So this was a pretty interesting project. Um, the first student I interviewed, student one, is a 21-year-old female from Freeport, Illinois. She's a friend of one of my good friends. She's a student at Columbia College in Chicago. She's a junior. And before my interview, my friend who connected me with her, she told me that this person has kind of changed quite a bit since going to college, and the city is how my friend um, referred to Chicago. Um, but so yeah, my first question was, how do you see your duty in life? In other words, how do you think life is meant to be lived? Um, and kind of put simply, uh, this student believed that her duty in life is to be kind to people and help where she can. But she also made it clear to me that she does not judge anyone because people have a right to act however they want. And something that she said is that, um, I don't believe in any sort of afterlife or, reward system for being a quote unquote good person. She said, I guess it doesn't really matter what we do or don't do. In the end, she said, in the end, we're all going in the ground, which was kind of an interesting, morbid, but kind of an interesting take on that. She said, I think we're all just here, and there's nothing beyond what we can see with our own eyes. Um, so the second question is, how do you think others ought to be treated by you? And she kind of echoed some of the same um, mentalities in this answer. Um, but she did say something that was kind of interesting. She said, she essentially said that she should treat others with dignity. She believes that. But she also believes that no one should expect to be treated a particular way by anyone. And this is a direct quote from her. She said, "I don't really think anyone ought to be treated in a special way by me. I just try to be a good person, whatever that even means, and be nice to people. But it gets on my uh, damn nerves when someone expects good treatment from me, because I don't think anyone should expect a specific sort of treatment by other people." She said, "We're all just here swirling around in the same pot. No one is above or beneath anyone else." So I was a little surprised by that answer, but then again, I'm not used to, at this point, having real communication with people who think this way. Um, so that was interesting. The third question is, do you believe in any sort of higher being? She said no. Or actually, she asked if I was talking about God. And I said not necessarily talking about God specifically, just any sort of higher being. And she said her answer, all the same, was still no. Um, and she said that she doesn't think any higher being worth his salt would still allow bad things to happen, which is something that I think a lot of us hear a lot when non-believers are talking about God, or at least that's been true for me. That's been my experience. So the next question I asked her was what her view of Christianity is, and she said, I didn't know this before. She said that her dad is actually a Methodist preacher, so I didn't know that, and so she actually grew up in church, and she grew up pretty involved, and she considered herself a believer, all the way up through high school. But she said, and this is a direct quote from her, she said, when I got to Columbia, I started meeting people who have different ways of life than me, and like they were happy. And it wasn't long before I started wondering if I really believed what I thought I did. So she kind of went on to tell me that she does not have problems with Christianity in general, but she's met her fair share of Christians who do not act in a way that goes with their professed beliefs, which again is another common argument that I hear, and that I suspect we probably all do, when non-believers are talking about Christianity, because at least in my experience, people don't really have problems with Christianity. I think most people can agree Christianity is a pretty good concept. It's often the Christians that they have problems with. So the next question I asked was, what is your view of the Christian God? And she told me that, in all honesty, she wishes God was real. She said that I spent the first 18 years of my life around the Bible, and the New Testament God sounds really cool. If someone actually saved me from my sins, I don't think I'd be able to turn them down. Which I thought was kind of interesting. It's like that wishful thinking. She doesn't believe in God, but she wishes she could. And then I asked, what is your view of Jesus? And this was a pretty short answer. She just said that her views of Jesus is kind of essentially the same as her view of God. So yes, her view of Christians. That was the next question I asked. And she said she doesn't really have any personal vendettas against Christians in general, but she did readily tell me that she has met her fair share of people who claim to be faithful Christians, but yet they don't act that way. And here's a pretty interesting quote that I took directly from her. She said, I've met Christians who wholeheartedly support Trump. It's effing disgusting. I obviously don't want to say that word, but I thought that was a really interesting quote from her. And then the last question we come up to is, has the Christian church ever bothered you? I was a little surprised by her answer to this question, and while her answer was yes, unsurprisingly, but she offered more than just condemning the church. She said, this is a direct quote from her, she said, I think there's a lot of fixing to do. Church isn't something that I want to be involved in, but I think the people who are involved need to examine themselves and figure out whether they're living up to the Bible standards. I may not be a Christian, but I've spent a lot of time in church, and I know the Bible as well as any Christian does. And I thought that was something that was really insightful from her, a non-Christian who grew up in church. The thing is, like, there are non-Christians all over the place, but a lot of those non-Christians who did grow up in church can be really insightful sometimes, and I think a lot of them can have some really interesting things to say that Christians ought to really take to heart, and really think about and process. So yeah, instead of condemning the church, it kind of seems to me like she was attempting to offer solutions as to how the church could improve, which I think was really cool. So student 2 is a 22-year-old senior who attends UT. And I actually got connected to him through one of my friends from high school. He is dating one of my friends from high school. He's from a non-religious family. He's from Mount Juliet, Tennessee. So we're just going to go ahead and jump right into it. I used, obviously, all the same questions. So how do you see your duty in life? In other words, how do you think life is meant to be lived? Student 2's answer to this question, he said that he believes we all ought to treat others the way we want to be treated. So not kind of too far off. There's some differences for sure, but not too far off from what student one said. And he said he wouldn't be able to expect good treatment from other people if he didn't treat others as he would want to be treated. Um, so I thought that was a good kind of rule of thumb. Um, how do you think others ought to be treated by you? This was a pretty short answer. He said it is essentially just the same as what he said for the first question. You know, treat others with respect and dignity. Do you believe in any sort of higher being? This was really interesting. Student two, he said that he doesn't believe, or he said he does believe there could possibly be some sort of higher being in existence, but he couldn't say for sure whether he believes that or not. But what was so interesting about this is he had a really intense story to go with that. He said that when he was a junior in high school, he got drunk at a party one night, and he attempted to drive home and crashed his car. And he said it was like 2 a.m. and the road he was driving on was kind of out there. And so he said, I assume this means he was out after the crash, but he said that he was told he was probably out there for about 20 minutes before anyone found him. And he said he could have died because he lost a lot of blood. But this is a direct quote from him. He said, "The fact that I'm still here makes me wonder if there might be some higher being." So that was really, really interesting to me, about, you know, kind of connecting that crisis and his coming through that, you know, as kind of wondering, you know, I wonder if there's something more out there. So the next question was your view of Christianity. He said, I made sure to clarify for this question that I was asking about his views on Christianity, not his views on Christians, because of course I come to that here in a few questions. But he said he doesn't believe, but he does acknowledge that there's some good ideas involved with it. So, you know, overall he agrees with a lot of what he called staples of the religion. But he said, if I'm correct in saying that Christianity is about loving people and doing your best to show that love to them, then I'm all for it. That's a really good mentality to have. So that was interesting. Then the next question is, what is your view of the Christian God? This answer kind of echoed some of the same general ideas that student one mentioned in her answer for the question about a higher being. He said that he would honestly like to believe in a God who is loving and all-powerful, but he simply can't because of the bad things that still happen. He said there's just too much crap that happens in our world. You know, his big sister miscarried her first child last year, which was something that I think was pretty hard for their family, especially her. And you know, he mentioned, you know, all the people who are being affected by the coronavirus and everything that's been happening in the Middle East, you know, for longer than any of us have even been alive. You know, and so he said, you know, that's just too much for me to believe in a loving and all-powerful God. You know, he sounds good on paper, but I just don't think he's real, is what he said. So what is your view on Jesus? He said he didn't really know much about Jesus besides what his girlfriend, my friend from high school, has said. She's a Christian. And he said they've had a few conversations about Jesus, but from what he did know, though, he seemed like, he said, a cool guy is what he said. And what is your view of Christians? He said overall, or no, that was me. I would say that he has a fairly positive view of Christians. He said that he's got several friends in his fraternity who identify as Christians, and they're nice people. He also said that his girlfriend is a Christian, and she's an incredibly kind person, which I can confirm. She's really cool. And then the last question for this one, has the Christian church ever bothered you? The overall answer to this question was no. He told me that he's never really interacted with church a lot. He said that he went to a lock-in at church a few years back with one of his friends, but besides that, he'd never really been inside a church. He doesn't really know how it works, and he readily admitted that. Um, and so that was a really interesting interview. But I think the one that hit me the hardest is the third student. The third student is a 19-year-old male, sophomore at Columbia State Community College here in Columbia. He's a friend of my brother's, and my brother told me a few details about him. Um, and you know, I was told that he comes from a very broken home, and I have to say that I am very saddened by a lot of the answers that he gave me, and you'll see why here in just a second. But you know, I believe the answers he gave me are very reflective of the way that he grew up, and it's really unfortunate. Um, and yeah, I'm just gonna get started here. Um, so the first question: how do you see your duty in life? How do you think life is meant to be lived? His answer was pretty short and to the point. He said that life is about survival. He said it's all about who can make it and who can't. He said it is an effed up world out there, man. You got to do what you got to do to make it. Is that direct quote from him. For the second question, this one might have hit me the hardest. You know, it's how do you think others ought to be treated by you? You know, before answering this question, he asked me if I wanted him to be honest, which I said yes, you know, of course. And here's what he told me. He said, and that this is, you know, of course, this is just directly from him. Said, my mama don't believe in me. None of my teachers ever believed in me. I pulled myself up by my own bootstraps and did what I had to do to come to college. But after this year, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't got any money to finish college. Tennessee residents can attain 2 free years of community college through something here in Tennessee called the Tennessee Promise. So he's in the last year of taking advantage of that opportunity, but he told me, you know, he doesn't know what he's going to do after that. And just continuing on with the direct quote, he said, I don't believe in helping people. No one ever helps me. How I treat you is how I treat you. If I like you, we're good. But if I don't like you, you'll effing know, is what he said. And I was a little taken aback by this answer in particular, because like I said in the beginning of the video, I come from a good, stable family. Like I said, I attended private Christian schools for the most part, and I rarely have contact with people who actually hold like these kind of views. You know, the first 2 students, that's one thing, but this one that, I don't know, it's just kind of something different. Do you believe in any sort of higher being? He said no. He believes that the only thing that's real is what we see in front of us, which is essentially what student 1 said as well. And what is your view on Christianity? His answer to this question, it was a little more mellow than I thought it might be, just based on his answers to questions I had already asked. He said that he has a couple of friends who he knows are Christians, but they don't really live out what he perceives to be the Christian calling, or a Christian mission is how I put it. He said, this is directly from him, he said, I got a couple of friends who I know are Christians, but they don't really act any differently than anyone else. Which was kind of hard to hear. I mean, you know, it's you know it's that way, but to hear a non-believer say that, I think kind of heightens the you know, the sense of, you know, we how important it is to live how we're called. So continuing on with the next question, I might have lied. I think this question probably hit me the hardest. The one, his answer to this one. So what is your view of the Christian God? The first thing he said to me was he thinks God is not real. You know, again, I was kind of taken aback by what he said next. This is directly from him. He said, my dad left before I was born. My mama don't have a job. She spends all her money on alcohol and drugs. I don't got any brothers or sisters. I have to take care of myself. I got a job just so I can help pay bills that my mama don't pay, because she don't have the money. I lay in bed at night hoping someone don't break into my effing house to take what little I do have. No God would allow that to happen. Yeah, that's in Colombia. There's 25% of Colombia residents live under the poverty line, and this kid is one of them. And it's like we know. I live on the opposite side of Colombia from where this student lives. He lives on the east side, I live on the west side. And the side where I live is, like in my neighborhood, there's a lot of, there's a lot of middle class families. There are also a lot of retired people. This is one of those neighborhoods where people are out walking their dog all the time. And College Hill is the name of the neighborhood where this kid lives. In College Hill, you don't do that. College Hill can be a very dangerous place in Colombia. And this is just kind of like, I know 25% of Colombia residents live under the poverty level, but I rarely have any real contact with any of them. But this even though it was only a FaceTime meeting, this was still very hard hitting. So got just a couple more questions here. What is your view of Jesus? He said that he doesn't believe Jesus is real. He didn't really say much more than that. What is your view of Christians? He kind of already touched on that a little bit. He said he doesn't necessarily have any issues with Christians, but he did say that he thinks a lot of them don't live according to what they claim to believe, which, like I said, I think is an answer that we find often with non-believers. And I think in that sense they can see things that we don't always see. And then the last one, has the Christian church ever bothered you? So he told me that he's never set foot in a church before. And this is a direct quote from him. He said, "Church ain't never bothered me, but I've never seen a church come into the place where I live and try to help people. Churches mostly just leave College Hill alone." Which I think was really sad, because here in Colombia there's literally a church on every street corner. But he said he has never seen a church come into his neighborhood. He said that they just kind of leave it alone, which was really sad, and something that that needs to be fixed. And that's on me just as much as it is anyone else here in Colombia. So those were my interviews. The first two were decent. They were all good, but the third one, like I said, was pretty hard hitting. It just kind of made me think a lot. Just to know there are people so close to me, geographically, that live like that. Well, not that they have to live like that. So yeah, that was interesting. Like I said, this project has been interesting. Yeah, I'm looking forward to watching everyone's videos. And like I said, I hope you all are doing well, staying healthy, and y'all take care.